There was a fork on the floor. Just one. Perfectly clean. No plate. No food. Just a stainless steel fork lying on the hardwood like it fell out of her hand mid-sentence. That's the first thing I noticed when I walked in. Then I saw her standing in the kitchen, facing the wall. She wasn't doing anything. Not washing dishes. Not cleaning. Just standing. Her hands at her sides like she was being arrested. I didn't say anything. Neither did she. There was a buzzing in the room, not from the lights or my phone. It was inside me. After exactly 12 seconds, I counted, she turned her head and said the one sentence I will never forget until my brain rots in the ground. If I cry, you won't believe it's real. That's how it started. Not with screaming. Not with a fight. Not even with a lie. It started with strategy. The impossible calm. She moved like her bones were underwater. Slow, measured. Walked past me without brushing my shoulder. Went straight to the hallway closet and pulled out his jacket. I didn't know it was his jacket at the time, of course. It looked like one of mine. I assumed I forgot about it. But she held it with both hands like she was trying not to worship it. And when she folded it, delicately, like it could bleed, she said something that still makes my spine hum. You need to understand this only happened because I thought you never would. The mirror she cracked. I followed her into the bathroom, not because I wanted to, but because I felt pulled. Like if I let her walk too far ahead, she'd vanish. Like she was on a timer and I didn't know when the buzzer would go off. She stood in front of the mirror, stared at herself, and said, "You still see me as her. That girl who wore sunflower earrings and said too many syllables when she was nervous. But she died, and you didn't notice." I wanted to speak. I should have spoken. Instead, I leaned against the doorframe like a coward and waited for her to keep going. She did. "Do you remember March 4th, 3 years ago?" "I do. You told me you were in traffic. But your Spotify was paused for an hour and 17 minutes. There was silence. You didn't cheat. I know that. But you didn't come home, either." I blinked. She turned slowly and said, "That's when I knew I could get away with it." The envelope under the fridge. You ever drop something behind the fridge and tell yourself you'll get it later? She didn't. She wanted me to find it. Slid it just far enough out that the corner poked into view like a loose tongue. I opened it when she went to the garage. Inside were 2 tickets. Not plane tickets. Not concert stubs. 2 parking receipts. One from a downtown hotel I'd never heard of. One from a hiking trail 4 counties away. Same day. Same time. Different names. Same last name. His. The sound of nothing breaking. I didn't yell. I didn't cry. I didn't even sit down. Instead, I put the receipts back in the envelope, slid it into the toaster slot, and waited for her to come back. When she did, she looked at me like she'd forgotten who I was. I said, "You left a fork on the floor." She said, "That's not mine." Then she smiled. She left again, this time without a word. No jacket, no keys, just walked out the front door like it wasn't her house anymore. I didn't follow. I just stood there in the kitchen with my hands in my pockets and stared at the toaster. The envelope still sat inside it, the corner of one of the parking receipts curling from the heat. I didn't pull it out. Instead, I picked up the fork. The one from earlier. Still spotless. Cold. Heavy. I pressed the flat of it to my forehead for a moment, like it could cool down the chaos bubbling inside me. I needed something physical, something real, because my thoughts were starting to fold in on themselves. That receipt. That name. His name. Same last name as mine. My heart wasn't racing, it was slow. Suspiciously slow, like it knew if it sped up, I'd spiral. So I sat down and typed the name into my phone. First and last. I didn't expect anything. But he existed. And he wasn't some stranger. He wasn't from work, or a hiking group, or her weird Wednesday film theory club that never actually watched movies. He was from before. Before me. A name I didn't recognize, but a face I'd seen. Once. In a photo she accidentally showed me 5 years ago, one she claimed was from some stupid college ex I barely even dated. A blurry photo of a guy with a camera, half smiling, one hand resting on her shoulder like he'd just finished whispering something into her hair. The caption on the original photo? She cut it off when she cropped it for her memories board. But now I knew what it said. Room 618. Our first time signing in as Mr. and Mrs. Dalton. Dalton. My last name. But this guy was no relative. And if she took his name once, and then gave it to me years later, then who the hell had I been married to all this time? The next few hours passed like I was stuck in the wrong dream. I kept doing normal things, loading the dishwasher, feeding the neighbor's cat, She was out of town, long story, even sorting the mail, but everything felt tilted. Every envelope felt like it might contain a clue. Every noise outside made me flinch. When she finally came home, it was dark. She didn't turn on the porch light, just slid inside like she hoped I'd be asleep on the couch. I wasn't. I didn't say a word. Neither did she. She walked past me and into the bathroom. The door clicked shut. Then I heard the sound of the mirror opening, the quiet squeak of pills being moved, and then a second toothbrush being pulled from a drawer she hadn't opened in months. I stood outside the door and asked, "How long has he been staying here?" There was no response. I waited. Then she said, almost softly, "Longer than you'd believe." What does that mean? Longer than I'd believe? What kind of answer is that? I thought about asking her why. Why now, why this way? But then I realized she wanted me to ask. She wanted this to be about pain, regret, closure. But I wasn't going to give her a movie script to perform in. So instead I asked, why me? Why marry me? She opened the bathroom door and looked at me like she pitied me. And that was worse than anything else so far. Because you were quiet, she said. You never asked questions. You didn't make me feel anything. And after him, that felt safe. I swear I could hear something crack inside me. Not dramatically, not like a plate smashing on the floor. More like the tiny tick of a watch mechanism breaking. The kind of sound you don't notice until everything's late. I slept in the car that night. Not because I had to. Not because I was angry. But because I didn't want to breathe the same air as her anymore. It felt borrowed. At 3:47 a.m., I sat up in the driver's seat and opened the envelope again. There was something else tucked behind the receipts. A post-it note. No writing on it. Just a drawing. A heart with 2 names inside it. His. And someone else's. Not mine. Not hers. I stared at the little post-it until dawn. There wasn't much on it. Just a red heart, drawn by hand, and 2 names in the center. The first was his. The second was Amira. A name I had never heard from Adeline's lips in 11 years. Not once. Not even in passing. But it was the way the heart was drawn that disturbed me most. Not childish. Not romantic. Precise. Every line even, the edges shaded like someone took their time. It didn't feel like a keepsake. It felt like a claim. I pulled out my laptop and searched the name alongside his. Not much. No social profiles. Nothing recent. But after an hour of digging, I found a review on a private cabin rental site, left 5 years ago. Perfectly secluded. Great for anniversaries. No cell signal, no noise, no guilt. A and D. A and D. Amira and Dalton. Not Adeline. But the date of that review? A week before our engagement. My skin went cold. Not the shivering kind. The numb, medical kind. The kind that makes you feel like you're watching yourself from across the room. If he had been with Amira, and Adeline had known, then why was she drawing hearts with his name? Or more terrifying, what if she had drawn it for him, and the second name wasn't hers? I couldn't stop shaking. Not with rage. Not even heartbreak. Just dread. Like I was being slowly lowered into a cold lake, and my body couldn't decide whether to scream or sink. Because if Amira was real and connected to Dalton, and somehow tied to Adeline, then this wasn't just some tangled love triangle. This was something else. Something designed. I needed answers. And I knew exactly who might have them. There was a number Dalton had scribbled on the back of one of the receipts. I hadn't noticed it until that morning. It was faded, like it had been written in pencil and rubbed half clean by accident. But I made it out. 867-201-4517. No name. Just the number. I didn't call. I couldn't call. Instead, I did what I've always done. I Googled it. Surprisingly, it pulled up a listing. Not a person. A business. Greenvale Early Childhood Center. Closed permanently. What the hell? I clicked through to the cached pages. There was a staff directory, archived from years ago. Blurry, low-res photos. Smiling people. A few kids in the background. And there, in the third row, wearing a yellow cardigan and the stiffest smile I'd ever seen. Adeline. Only she wasn't listed as Adeline. She was listed as Miss Amy. Amy. No. No way. This wasn't right. Unless she had changed her name. Or it wasn't her. But I knew that face. I kissed that face. I studied every inch of it for over a decade. Then something else hit me. In the same staff directory, 2 names below hers, was a man named Dalton R. And under that, in the parent volunteers section, was the name Amira B. I slammed the laptop shut. My ears were ringing. This wasn't just a romantic mess. This was a shared life. They weren't exes. They weren't strangers. They had all been part of something bigger. I took the post-it note and held it up to the light. There were faint pencil lines beneath the ink. Someone had drawn over something. Names written before the inked ones. I took out my pencil, gently shaded over the surface, and watched the faint outlines return. And there, under Dalton's name, barely visible, Ernest, my name. And under Amira's? A different name, Adeline. My wife had erased both our names and replaced them. I dropped the post-it and stood up too fast. My vision blurred. My knees buckled slightly, and I had to steady myself on the counter. My wife who once cried over a dead plant, who sang to commercials, who made up silly holidays so we could eat cake on weekdays, had been living inside a story I was never invited to. And worse, at some point, she wrote me into it, then crossed me out. I didn't shower, didn't eat, just drove. The Greenvale Childhood Center had been closed for 4 years, but the building still stood, abandoned, gray, with ivy curling around the corners like it was being slowly swallowed by time. I parked 2 blocks away, unsure if I was trespassing, unsure if I cared. My hands were sweating against the steering wheel. I wiped them, grabbed the flashlight I keep in the glove box for emergencies, and stepped out into the dull, overcast morning. It didn't look like a place where children once laughed. It looked like a place where memories had been buried. The front doors were sealed with chain and padlock, but the back, the rusted fire exit, had been jimmied open long ago. I slipped inside and immediately regretted it. The air was thick with mold and something harder to name. Not decay, not rot. Regret. That's what it smelled like. That, and old crayons. I walked past faded posters, overturned chairs, a forgotten sweater still hanging on a hook like its owner would be back after lunch. Then I found the main office. The desk was still intact, drawers warped from moisture. I pulled one open and found water-damaged paperwork, most of it unreadable. But in the bottom drawer, beneath a curled folder labeled Archive, 2018, I found a plastic bin of attendance logs, spiral-bound and yellowed, but legible. I flipped through pages filled with scribbled checkmarks, stickers, and sloppy handwriting. Teachers signed initials. Parents left notes. Then I saw it. Amira B. Drop-off. Dr/pickup. A.L. D.R. equals Dalton R. A.L. equals Adeline L. Only Adeline's last name was an L. Not back then. Not until me. Unless she changed it. Again. But why would she be listed as a pickup contact for Amira's child? I scanned the entry again. Wait. Not Amira B. It said Amira Bell. A child. Not the woman from the photo. Not the parent volunteer. A student. I don't remember sitting down. I must have. The next thing I knew, I was on the floor with my back against the cabinet, logbook in my lap, breathing in ragged gasps. Adeline hadn't been having an affair with Dalton. She had been raising a child with him. Or more disturbingly, was Amira Bell their daughter? And if so, why had she never told me? Why did she erase both our names from that heart? Why hide that life completely? I turned back to the binder and began flipping through it frantically. Amira's name appeared dozens of times, stickers next to her birthday, notes about allergies, one pink sticky note labeled, picked up early, MOM had, and APPD. Next to that note, signed initials, AD, not Adeline, not Dalton, something in between. The signature felt practiced. I reached into the bin and pulled out a stack of photographs held together by a rubber band, so brittle it crumbled in my hands. Inside were candid shots, kids playing on the playground, baking cookies, coloring on the floor. One photo made me drop the whole stack. A little girl in a blue jumper with a wide, curious smile, sitting in a woman's lap. The woman was my wife, and the child looked exactly like her. My mind fought the conclusion, but my eyes knew better. This was no student she volunteered for. This wasn't an old co-worker's daughter. This was her child. A child she never told me about. A child she had with Dalton. Or no. There was one more possibility. What if the child wasn't his? What if she was mine? Everything in my chest went tight at once. I tried to stand but stumbled. The room warped slightly at the edges. I felt like I was looking at my life through a cracked phone screen. Familiar, but suddenly hard to trust. My wife had hidden a child from me. She had rewritten her identity, replaced our names in her private universe, and carried on like none of it ever happened. And the worst part? She'd look me in the eyes every single day and asked if I wanted kids. Every time, she smiled like it was a fun hypothetical. Every time, I told her I wasn't sure. And every time, she never flinched. She knew. She always knew. And she let me live as if I was childless, when I might have been a father all along. As I stumbled back out into the morning light, the sky finally opened up and it began to rain. Not the gentle kind, the punishing kind. The kind that forces you to notice things you'd rather ignore. I stood there soaked, holding a photo of a girl I never met and a woman I no longer recognized, and realized this story wasn't about betrayal anymore. It was about memory, about identity, about a child who didn't know I existed, and a woman who erased me from the past, so she could keep me from the truth in the present. I didn't go home. Not because I was afraid of facing Adeline. I'd passed that threshold already. I didn't go home because I knew if I saw her face again before I had answers, I would scream something so vile it would never leave the walls. So I drove. Nowhere in particular. Highway 34, then some winding side roads that looked like they hadn't been repaved since the 80s. I let the rain blur the windshield until I couldn't tell the difference between the sky and the road. At a gas station in the middle of what might as well have been nowhere, I connected to the spotty Wi-Fi and started searching. Not for Adeline. For Amira Bell. I didn't even know if that was her real name. It could have been made up, but something in that logbook had felt too mundane to be fiction. Allergies. Nap schedule. Favorite snack. You don't invent that kind of detail unless it's real. I searched school records. Old blog posts. Family forums. Local newspaper archives. Anything with the name. Most of it led nowhere. But one article caught my eye. A community spotlight from a town just 20 minutes away. Young artist featured in youth showcase. Amira Bell wows with mixed media portraits. There was a photo attached. She was older now, maybe 13 or 14. But it was her. And her face. God, her face. There were pieces of me in it. The shape of her nose. The eyebrows. That slight tilt of the head like she was trying to hear something behind you. That wasn't a coincidence. That wasn't a maybe. That was blood. I called the library where the event had been held. Told them I was a teacher interested in contacting one of the students for a project. They gave me the school name. A small private academy upstate. One phone call later, and I had it. A parent contact card for Amira Bell Langdon. Guardian name listed, Adeline Langdon. Same spelling. Same middle initial. No Dalton. She had given the girl her last name. Not mine. Not his. Hers. I drove like a man possessed. The address was a rental house behind a bakery. The kind of place you'd miss if you blinked. The yard was small and overgrown. A chipped swing creaked from a leafless tree. No toys. No sign of a child. For a moment, I thought I had the wrong place. Then the front door opened. And there she was. Not Adeline. Amira. She looked at me the way only a kid who's been lied to 1,000 times can look at a stranger. Guarded but curious. Like she'd already invented a version of me in her head and was now comparing notes. Are you lost? She asked. I choked on the air before answering. No. I'm looking for your mom. She frowned. She's not here. I hesitated. Is Adeline your mom? She stared at me for too long, then finally nodded, and then said something that shattered me. But she says I used to have another one. I didn't know what to say. My mouth opened, but nothing came out. My brain wanted to scream. What does that mean? Another one? Another what? She must have seen the panic in my face, because she took a small step back. Are you a cop or something? No, I said too quickly. I think I used to know your mom. A long time ago. You talk like her, Amira said. Do I? She shrugged. She doesn't talk like that anymore. That sentence should have been benign. Harmless. But it wasn't. It was layered. Coated in a kind of tired wisdom a child shouldn't have. I asked her if I could wait, but she shook her head. Then she did something unexpected. She reached into her hoodie pocket and pulled out a keychain. It had a plastic photo inside, the kind you get from a grocery store booth. She held it up to me like a peace offering. This is the only picture she let me keep, she said. I took it and nearly dropped it. It was me, a younger me, arms around Adeline, smiling like I didn't have a worry in the world. Adeline had told me she lost that photo in a move 6 years ago. She told me it was just some cheap thing from a kiosk. She told me it wasn't important. But she gave it to Amira. Not to keep. To remember. I gave the photo back and nodded, trying to breathe like a normal person. I asked one last question. I said, Has she ever talked about someone named Dalton? Amira paused, thoughtful, then said, she used to. But not anymore. What did she say about him? She said he was the reason I had to forget everything. Then she closed the door. No goodbye, just a quiet click. And I stood there in the rain again, clutching nothing, and finally understanding something that had been clawing at me from the beginning. Adeline hadn't betrayed me because she fell in love with someone else. She'd betrayed me because she'd replaced me, and never told the person she replaced me with that I ever existed. I didn't drive straight home. I couldn't. Not after the door closed in my face like that. Not after seeing that photo of myself I hadn't known was missing, staring back at me from a keychain in the hands of a child I may have helped create. My chest felt like it had been replaced with a paper bag, something crinkled, hollow, and ready to tear if I breathed too hard. I pulled off the road and sat in a church parking lot until the sun had disappeared and the rain started again, like clockwork. When I finally made it home, I half expected the house to be empty. I pictured the closet stripped, drawers open, the note left on the counter like they do in movies. But when I opened the door, the smell hit me first. She was cooking, something with rosemary. My favorite, or at least it had been, before food stopped tasting like anything. Adeline was standing at the stove with her back to me, humming. That hum, that same tune she'd always used when she was bored. It was automatic, unthinking. She was humming like it was just another Tuesday night, and I hadn't spent the day digging through the ruins of a secret life she built without me. She didn't turn when she said, "You went looking for her, didn't you?" I didn't respond. She stirred the pot once, then turned off the heat. Still didn't face me. She wasn't supposed to remember, she added quietly. I made sure of that. I stepped farther into the kitchen. Why does she have a picture of me? Adeline didn't move. Didn't breathe, even. She found it, she finally whispered. I hid it in a box in the old house. I didn't mean for her to. Look, it's not what you think. You're going to say that again? I said. After all this, that's the line you still think works? She finally turned. And I don't know what I expected, defensiveness, anger, maybe tears. But not this. She looked tired. Not the surface kind. Soul tired. Like her body was still running on a program her heart had abandoned. I need you to understand something, she said, walking slowly to the kitchen table and sitting down across from where I stood. You're not crazy. Everything you found is real. The receipts, the child, the school, all of it. I didn't hide it because it wasn't true. I hid it because it was. I pulled out a chair, but didn't sit. You had a daughter, I said. Before me. She nodded. Yes. Was she mine? No. That single word felt like it sucked all the air out of the room. But it also clarified something. Made the picture a little sharper. But you let me think you never had kids. I wanted that to be true, she said. I wanted a clean slate. You were the only person I'd ever met who didn't want to fix me or claim me. You were quiet. Safe. You let me disappear into you. And for a while, I thought I could live like that. You let her believe I was never real. She never knew you, she snapped back. You were never in her life. Because you chose that. She folded her hands and looked away. For a moment, we sat in silence. The kind that doesn't belong to either person. The kind that fills up all the oxygen in the room and dares you to inhale it. Then she said something that hit me harder than anything else. She remembers you anyway. I froze. She has dreams, Adeline continued, staring down at the table. She describes a man who looked like you. A man who held her once and said her name like it was a secret. She told me that when she was 5. I told her it was just imagination. My throat was dry. Was it? I don't know. What does that even mean? She looked up, eyes watery but not crying. It means there's a part of me that wonders if I did let you meet her. Once. Briefly. A day or two, maybe. When I was too tired to lie. But I can't remember it clearly anymore. I buried so much of that life that I can't trust what's real. You buried me. She didn't deny it. And then, for the first time since this all began, she reached into her pocket and slid something across the table. A folded, worn piece of paper. I didn't touch it at first. But when I did, and opened it, I saw my own handwriting. A letter. Short. Written in pen on the back of a grocery list. She looks just like you. I didn't know I could feel this much and still be afraid of it. If I'm gone by the time you read this, it's because I don't know how to love someone without losing myself in the process. But thank you for letting me hold her. My signature at the bottom. No date. No context. Just the quiet confession of a man I didn't remember being. I left the kitchen. Not in a storm. Not slamming doors. Not shouting. I walked upstairs, into the spare bedroom, and closed the door behind me. Not to sleep. Not even to think. Just to sit. Because for the first time since this started, I wasn't angry at Adeline. I was angry at the man I used to be. It was past midnight when I got back in the car. I didn't tell Adeline where I was going. I didn't even look at her on my way out the door. She didn't ask. She just stood at the bottom of the stairs like a ghost, half-shadowed by the dim hallway light, as if she already knew I wouldn't be coming back the same. This time, I didn't use the GPS. My hands remembered the way. It was muscle memory, what some people call intuition, but what I now understood to be something stranger. Residual truth, maybe. The kind of knowledge that sits just beneath the conscious mind, like a song you didn't know you knew until you hear the first few notes, and suddenly you're humming along. I parked across the street from the small rental house again, same chipped swing on the same sad tree. The street was dead silent. I expected the windows to be dark, but the living room light was on. She was awake, and when I knocked, she answered almost immediately. She didn't look surprised to see me. She didn't ask what I wanted. She just stepped aside like I had a right to be there. And maybe I did. Maybe I always did. She sat on the couch without a word, knees pulled up to her chest, eyes watching me with that same unreadable calm. I sat in the armchair across from her, but I didn't speak yet. I couldn't. I needed her to be the one to start this time. I needed to know she was leading me somewhere I hadn't already imagined. She reached under the couch cushion and pulled out a shoebox. No lid. No label. Inside were scraps. Polaroids, torn corners of birthday cards, ticket stubs from a zoo I don't remember visiting. And on top of it all, a small, red plastic bracelet, the kind they give you at hospitals or child care centers. She handed it to me. My name was on it. Just my first name. Not Dad. Not Father. Not Mr. Langdon. Just Ernest. My throat burned. You kept this? I asked. No, she said. I found it. Where? In a box in storage. After we moved the first time. She said, like she was talking about something normal. Like moving with your maybe father and your maybe mother, and then never speaking of it again was just another Tuesday in childhood. I looked down at the bracelet, trying to anchor myself to it, to prove that this was all real and not some artifact I'd hallucinated. And that's when I saw something that made my blood run cold. Underneath the sticker with my name, barely visible, almost worn away, was another name. It had been covered up, but the edge of the old label peeked out just enough to read it. Marcus, what is this? I asked. Amira didn't answer immediately. She took out a Polaroid from the box and handed it to me. It was a man I didn't recognize. Same black hair as me. Similar jawline. Even the eyes were close. He was holding a child, Amira, clearly, and smiling like the world had paused just for him. That's my dad, she said. I blinked. Dalton. No. Marcus. The bracelet dropped from my hand. But, Adeline said. I know what she said, Amira cut in. But none of it's true. Not really. She stood and began pacing. Her voice got quiet, like she was remembering it as she spoke. She told me about Dalton when I was little. Told me he was the reason we moved so much. Said he was dangerous, that he wanted to take me away. But she also said weird things, like that I was part of something sacred, that I was a symbol of redemption. She made up stories every year. Sometimes I was born on purpose, sometimes by accident, sometimes after a dream she had in college. She looked at me then, and for the first time, she looked tired. And then I found this box, and the photos, and the old letters she tried to burn. What letters? She opened her hoodie and pulled out a plastic baggie from the inside pocket. Inside were blackened, curled scraps of paper, burned on the edges but still legible in the middle. One of them had writing in my handwriting, another in someone else's. The third was typed. All three letters mentioned Amira. All three referenced a custody arrangement. And all three were dated within weeks of each other. But none of them matched. One said Marcus was the father. Another said it was Dalton. The third said it was me. My name, my signature. The format of my old work email. Everything down to the way I crossed my T's. But I don't remember writing it. I don't remember any of it. And yet, I believed it. Because it felt like me. Amira sat back down. She told me once that memories aren't about truth. They're about weight. The ones that stay with you are the ones you agree to carry. So she faked all of this. She shook her head. No. Worse. What's worse than that? She never chose one version. She just let them all exist at once, depending on who was asking. I didn't say anything. I couldn't. I was choking on 1,000 unfinished sentences. Amira leaned forward. I don't know who you are to me, she said softly. But I know this. When I look at you, I don't feel afraid. And I've never felt that way about any man who's ever walked through that door. I swallowed hard. What do you want from me? She smiled, sadly. Nothing. Then she stood, walked to the kitchen, and flicked off the living room light. As the darkness folded around us, she whispered one last thing from the hallway. But I think she wanted you to come back. That's why she left the bracelet. By the time I got back, the house was dark, but I knew she was awake. I could feel it. That strange charge in the air, like the atmosphere itself was holding its breath. I stepped through the front door, dripping with cold night air and everything I now knew. And she was waiting for me in the living room, sitting on the couch, wrapped in a blanket she hadn't used in years. For a long time, neither of us said anything. I thought I would walk in here and demand an explanation, accuse her, condemn her, collect whatever pieces of my ego were still scattered across the floors of this wrecked life. But when I saw her face, something else took over. She looked like someone who had finally stopped running. Not because she was caught, but because she was just too exhausted to keep going. I told her, I said. Amira knows about the bracelet. Adeline didn't even flinch. She looked at the floor, blinking slowly. She was supposed to forget you, she whispered. That was the only way I thought it could work. Why me? I asked. Why did you bring me into all of this if you were never going to let me exist in it? She looked up. Because you made me feel like I deserved to be known again. I wanted to believe I could rewrite it all, that I could start fresh. But I was building a life on a lie I never fully buried. And I was afraid that if I told you the truth, you'd disappear. I did disappear, I said gently. But not all at once. You erased me piece by piece. She nodded. I know. I sat down across from her. No walls. No weapons. Just two people who used to be in love, trying to make sense of the wreckage. Adeline, I said quietly, there's a version of this story where I never come back, where I slam the door, and you live alone, and I become a cautionary tale you tell yourself at night. I wouldn't blame you, she said, but that's not the version I'm choosing. She blinked. Why? Because she's real, I said. Amira, she's not some ghost of your past. She's not a symbol of your guilt. She's a person, and she deserves better than to grow up thinking she came from nothing. Or worse, from chaos. Adeline's eyes filled with tears, not the manipulative kind, not strategic. Real. Quiet. She said nothing, just nodded like a child being forgiven for something they'd kept hidden far too long. And me? I added. I don't want revenge. I want purpose. I pulled something from my jacket and placed it on the table. The bracelet. The old, faded name still peeking from beneath the sticker. I want her to decide who I am. If I'm a stranger, or something else. And me? She asked, her voice breaking. What do I get to be now? I looked at her for a long moment. That's up to you, I said. But maybe it's time to stop being everyone else's story and finally write your own. It's been 11 months since that night. Amira and I meet once a week. At first, it was awkward. She was guarded, rightfully so. But then we started talking. About music. Art. Which of us hated math more? I never asked her to call me anything. Never pushed. Then, one afternoon at a bookstore cafe, she looked up from her sketchbook and said, You don't look like a Marcus. I laughed. Good. Because I'm not. She tilted her head. Ernest feels too small, though. What would you call me? She thought about it, then grinned. Maybe just Ernie. That was the first time I cried in front of her. She didn't flinch. She just kept drawing. As for Adeline, she's still figuring herself out. We don't live together anymore. But we talk. Not about the past. Not about forgiveness. Just honestly. She's getting help. She's building something of her own. Maybe we'll never be what we once were. Maybe that's a blessing. But here's what I know now. People aren't their worst mistakes. Memories can lie, but love, when it's real, outlives even the messiest truths. And some names are worth keeping, even if you have to earn them twice.